Imagine a winter so unforgiving that even the earth seems to surrender. The ground freezes into stone, the wind cuts like a blade, and silence fills the air where life once thrived. In a lonely corner of the frontier, far from towns and far from help, stood a small wooden cabin barely strong enough to fight the cold. Inside lived a mother and her 10 children, clinging to each other as the world outside slowly turned against them. There were no roads, no neighbors close enough to hear their cries, and no certainty that tomorrow would bring anything but more hunger. This was not a story of comfort or luck. This was a story of survival, written in frost, fear, and unbreakable love. The winter came early that year, crueler than anyone remembered. The crops had failed before harvest, destroyed by unexpected frost and weeks of relentless cold. The soil had offered nothing, and the land gave no second chances. The children watched as their food supplies disappeared one by one. First, the fresh vegetables were gone, then the dried grains, then the last sack of flour. Each meal became smaller, quieter, heavier with unspoken worry. Their mother never complained, never showed fear, but inside her heart, a storm was raging. She had already lost her husband the year before, taken by illness after a harsh season. Now she stood alone, responsible for 10 fragile lives depending entirely on her strength. As the nights grew longer and colder, hunger became a constant presence in the cabin. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. It crept in slowly, weakening bodies, dulling energy, stealing warmth from the bones. The children tried to be brave. They learned not to ask for more food. They learned to eat slowly, to savor every bite as if it might be their last. The youngest barely cried anymore. The oldest tried to help, gathering wood and melting snow for water, but even their efforts were limited by exhaustion. Every night, as the fire burned low, the mother sat awake, listening to their breathing, praying it would not stop before morning. One evening, as the wind howled like a warning from the dark, she realized something terrifying. Hope was fading, not just from their bodies, but from their eyes, and she knew that once hope died, survival would follow. That night, while her children slept, she wrapped herself in a thin coat and stepped outside into the frozen wilderness. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, only that she could not return empty-handed. She remembered something her grandmother once said long ago, a lesson passed down from generations who lived before comfort existed, that when food disappears, knowledge becomes the last form of survival. She began gathering whatever the land would give her. Fallen branches, tough roots buried under snow, bark stripped carefully from dead trees, even scraps left behind by animals that had passed through the area. Her hands bled from the cold, her fingers stiff and numb, but she kept going. By the time the sky began to lighten, she returned with an armful of things most people would consider useless. But to her, they were hope. That morning she built something simple but life-changing. Using broken wood and rope, she constructed a small smoking rack beside the cabin. She remembered how smoke could preserve food, how it could turn hours into days and days into weeks. Slowly, carefully, she began drying everything she had gathered: roots, bark, scraps of meat, even bones. The fire burned low and steady, filling the air with smoke and the faint smell of survival. It wasn't much, but it was something, and in times like these, something was everything. From that day on, life became a strict routine. Every piece of food was measured, every meal was planned. No one ate more than they absolutely had to. The mother taught her children how to chew slowly, how to drink warm water to trick their stomachs into feeling full, how to respect every crumb as if it were gold. She often skipped meals herself, claiming she wasn't hungry, smiling through the pain while her body weakened quietly. At night, she told stories to keep their spirits alive, stories of green fields, of warm summers, of a future where hunger no longer ruled their lives. The first winter passed, though barely. They survived, but survival came at a cost. Their bodies were thinner, weaker, worn down by months of struggle, yet they were alive. And in that, the mother found strength to continue. But the second winter arrived with even greater cruelty. Snow fell earlier than before, thicker and heavier. Animals vanished. The land became silent and unforgiving. Other families in the distance abandoned their homes or simply disappeared. Death became a quiet rumor carried by the wind. This time the hunger was worse, much worse. Food supplies were almost non-existent. The mother's hands cracked open from cold and labor. Her face grew pale. Her strength faded, but her will did not. She trapped small animals when she could, boiled bones until they dissolved into thin broth, crushed dried bark into powder to thicken soups. She learned to stretch nothing into something, to make a single meal last days. Some nights she went to sleep dizzy and weak, giving her portion to her children without a second thought. There were moments when despair crept in, when the silence felt too heavy, when even prayer felt exhausted. One night, her oldest son asked her in a trembling voice if they were going to die. She pulled him close, holding him tighter than ever before, and whispered that as long as she was breathing, they would survive. And she meant it. Those words became her promise, her strength, her reason to wake up every morning despite the pain. The third winter arrived like a final test. By now, the mother had mastered survival. She knew how to preserve food, how to manage fire, how to ration without wasting a single crumb. She used ashes to conserve heat. She kept the fire small to save wood. She reused everything, wasted nothing. Her children followed her example, quiet and strong beyond their years. They had learned discipline, patience, and resilience in ways no child ever should. Yet these lessons kept them alive. Then, one morning, something changed. The cold loosened its grip. The snow began to melt. The air felt different. The sun stayed a little longer in the sky. And beneath the frozen soil, the first signs of life appeared. Small green shoots pushed through the earth, fragile yet determined. When the mother saw them, she fell to her knees and cried, not from fear, but from relief. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. Spring returned slowly, gently, as if rewarding them for their endurance. The children stepped outside without shivering. The land began to breathe again. Food became possible. Life returned. And with it came the realization of what they had endured together. Years later, those children grew into strong adults. Some became farmers, some teachers, some leaders in their communities. But all of them carried the same story in their hearts, the story of a woman who refused to surrender, who turned desperation into determination, who proved that love is the strongest survival tool of all. Her story was never written in books or carved into stone, but it lived on through the lives she saved. It became a quiet reminder that even in the darkest winters, even when the world seems empty and cruel, human strength can rise higher than fear. That survival is not about having everything, but about refusing to give up when you have nothing. And as the sun once again warmed the land she fought so hard to protect, her life became proof that hope, when guarded with courage, can outlast even the harshest winter. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest strength is simply choosing to endure when everything tells you to quit.